Welcome to the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast, hosted by your favourite duo, Stephen and Charlene. They're here to help you transform your mindset and create a positive outlook on life. Are you tired of feeling stuck and unfulfilled? Are you ready to take control of your thoughts and emotions and rewrite your story? Well, you're in the right place. They will be sharing inspiring stories, practical tips, and expert advice to help you on your journey to a better you. You'll learn how to let go of negative self-talk, embrace your strengths, and focus on the good things in life. Each episode will be joined by amazing guests who have rewritten their own life stories and are now living their best lives. From successful entrepreneurs to accomplished athletes, we'll bring you stories of resilience, courage, and triumph. So grab a cup of coffee, get cozy, and get ready to be inspired. Tune in every week for a new episode of the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. Let's rewrite our stories together and make every day count.
In this episode of Rewrite Your Life Story podcast, we hear about Matt Goodluck. Matt is an inspiring figure who has built a successful career in the voiceover industry after spending 15 years in various roles with the Department of Immigration in Australia. Born and raised in Australia, Matt travelled to the UK after leaving high school and ended up working in the music business for 7 years. Upon his return to Australia, he found himself working in an entry-level admin role at the Department of Immigration. Over the next few years, he worked his way up to the executive and management roles, but he never felt passionate about his work. So join us as we delve into his story.
Before we get started, we want to remind you that the information presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are their own and do not represent the views of any organisation or entity. Additionally, any information presented should not be taken as legal, medical, or financial advice. Always consult with a licensed professional in the respective field for any advice or guidance. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic and learn how to transform our lives through positive thinking and taking control of our stories. Thanks for joining us.
Before we begin, we want to give you a heads up. We may be discussing some sensitive and personal topics that might bring up some strong emotions or discomfort. Our goal is to create a safe and supportive space, but we know that everyone's experiences and triggers are different. If you start feeling overwhelmed or triggered during an episode, remember to prioritize your well-being. It's totally okay to hit pause and take a break. Your self-care is important, and looking after your mental and emotional health should always come first. If you ever need extra support, we encourage you to reach out to a mental health professional or someone you trust. You're not alone, and there are resources available to help you on your personal journey. Thank you for joining us on this incredible ride with the Rewrite Your Life Story podcast. Together we'll navigate life's challenges and rewrite our narratives with strength and resilience.
Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast on Rewrite Your Life Story. And I'm really excited because we're interviewing Matt Goodluck today. Now, you've probably already heard his voice around. It's definitely a familiar voice. Matt is a voiceover artist, but also a musician, and he's got such an interesting story. Now, if you've been following our podcast for a while, you actually recognize Matt's voice on our podcast as doing our introduction. So welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Welcome, Matt.
Thank you so much, guys.
Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, shall I start right from the beginning?
Start right from the beginning.
I guess my story starts pretty much when I left school. I was one of those people that I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left school, and I was kind of envious of those people that said, oh, well, I'm going to go to university and study this or that. And I thought, well, I don't know what I want to spend my time doing. And I couldn't think of anything that I wanted to invest 4 or 5 years of my life pursuing. I decided to travel. I had a good friend that had done a lot of traveling around the world, and he kind of inspired me. But I had no real plan to go with that. I just thought, well, I'll go overseas and see what happens. And look, I'm a big music fan. As you can see behind me, I've got an enormous collection of music. And, it was my dream to go overseas and see all these bands that I'd grown up loving that I never had the opportunity to see here in Australia. So I went to England, and what was intended to be maybe a 6-month trip turned into 7 years. So it really is a long story, and I won't bore you with all the intricate details, but I ended up living with these guys who were in a band that I was a fan of. Started working with them and just going on the road and selling merchandise and just being a part of the team and helping out with the day-to-day workings of the band. And, as a 20-year-old, that was like a dream come true. I was getting to tour all of Europe with a rock band and, live all my dreams. So it was so much fun. And I lived in England for 4 years in total. At the end of that period, it was getting harder for me to stay there. And I thought, well, okay, maybe it's time I return to Australia. But, I didn't really have any firm plans. So I was talking one day on the phone to a friend of mine in Germany who ran a record label, and he distributed the bands that I was working with. And I told him I was coming back to Australia, and he said, well, what would you think about coming to work for us? And I said, it kind of threw me. And I thought, well, okay, why not? I didn't have anything to come to back in Australia. So it was at that point I decided to move to Germany. And I lived there for 3 years, working for a record label.
Which part of Germany?
I was living in a small town called Kleve, which is right on the Dutch border, about an hour away from Dusseldorf. It was really quite challenging in some respects because I was living in a very small town. And while in some of the bigger cities, lots of people speak English and it's a little bit easier to fit in, not many people spoke English in this town, and my German's pretty bad. So it was a challenge, but I loved what I did. And so that made up for it. But after 3 years, I just felt I needed to do something else. And so that's when I decided to return to Australia. And I came back and, I had no idea what to do. And I'd had all this great experience in the music industry. It was right at the point, the end of the 90s, where the music industry was really changing. People were no longer buying music and then they were downloading it and all the rest of that. All of the record companies that I approached here sort of said, look, you've got fantastic experience, but we just don't need anybody. The business is changing. So, it was a hard realization that, I'm going to have to get a real job. And one day a job came up for the government working for the immigration department of all people. And I really wasn't sure about it, but it was an opportunity too good to pass up. It was a good, stable job with great benefits. And I thought, well, I have to try. And I got the job. So I went in at a sort of an admin kind of level. Over the years, I just worked my way up, keeping in mind I didn't have any real qualifications or anything for this type of work. But I worked my way up. I worked hard and eventually ended up in management and executive positions in the government. And after working for the government for 15 years, I'd had enough. It really was not my passion. When people said to me, oh, what do you do for a living? I would say, oh, well, I work for the government, but I used to live overseas and I used to do all these things and blah, blah, blah. And that was the life that I still was proud of, and less so the life I was currently living. And it got to a point where I just thought, I really need to do something else. And I thought, what could I do? Get another management role somewhere else. And I thought, well, that's not going to really solve my problem. And in the meantime, I had been building a career as a voiceover artist. It was really a hobby, to be honest. I'd had so many people say to me, wow, you've got a fantastic voice. You'd be really good in radio or doing ads, this sort of thing. And I'd kind of ham it up and put on this sort of deep movie voice, in a world where one man, all of that sort of thing. And eventually so many people were saying it to me that I thought, well, maybe I should look into this seriously. So like I said, it really started out as a hobby, and it was just something that I would do the odd job once a month here or there. And it was fun because, you could say, well, yeah, I do this little thing on the side and it's pretty cool. And people thought it was pretty cool, and you're getting paid for talking. So, I was really happy to do that on the side while I was working for government. And towards the last few years of my time in government, I decided to go part-time and focus a little bit more on trying to build the voiceover stuff. So I did that. Initially, I was going part-time, so I was having just 1 day off a week, and then eventually 2 days off a week. And life was pretty good. I mean, I could deal with going into the office only 3 days a week if I got to spend a couple of days focusing on what I really liked. But then it got to a point where I just thought, no, I've had enough. I started talking to people in the industry to question them and say, look, what do you think the chances are of me potentially trying to create a career out of doing voiceover full time? And everybody said the same thing to me. They all said, no, you can't do it. It's not possible. It's not the 1980s anymore. You won't survive. And looking back, I can understand why they said that. Most people think of voiceover as, doing TV and radio commercials, but there's so much more to it than just that. And I knew that sort of deep inside. And I felt that, look, I'm already spending 2 days a week trying to build this business. What if I had the whole week? Surely it would, build and I would get more work. So I decided I created a safety net for myself. I took long service leave from the government at half pay. So I had that safety net where I was still getting a little bit of money coming in. And I thought, if this all goes pear-shaped, I've still got a job that I can fall back on. I worked damn hard to build the contacts and to start bringing the work in. And after 9 months, I got a call from my former employer and they said, you have to make a decision. You either come back to work or you resign. And I essentially said, see you later. And I haven't looked back. And that was just over 6 years ago. That was a really long-winded response to your initial question, but it's been a long and winding road. It's been really interesting.
Yeah. So you mentioned that people were telling you, no, it's not possible, right? And obviously you didn't allow that to affect you because you still went out and did it. How do you believe you were able to navigate through that at the time?
I think I was because I really wanted this to work so much, I looked outside of the box and I thought, okay, well, TV and radio is one aspect of voiceover. What else is there? And I started thinking, okay, well, what about when you ring up a company and you hear somebody on the other end of the phone? That's a voiceover. Training videos. God knows I had endured so many training courses in government and heard, these dry voices telling you what to do and whatnot. Education courses, e-learning, things like that, cinema trailers, games, apps. There's so many different elements to voiceover. And one person in the industry gave me some really good advice. They said, don't try and be everything. Focus on what you're good at and stick with that and really make it the best you can be. And that was really good advice because, there's lots of different styles of voiceover out there. And as you can hear with my voice, a lot of people actually think that I'm putting on this voice and I'm really not. This is my regular day-to-day voice, despite what people may think. So, I kind of played up to that a little bit and I thought, well, okay, my voice it's strong, it's articulate, it's good for those professional style deliveries, which are things like phone messaging, training, e-learning, corporate videos, internal product videos and things like that. So basically I thought, okay, well, what are the sort of companies that would need someone like me? So I just started going online and Googling production companies, video development companies, training organizations, all those sorts of people that I thought, well, they're putting a video together or they're putting a training package together, but they need someone like me to add the voice. So eventually it paid off. It was a lot of hard work and, I don't particularly love the cold calling because, it can be a little bit soul destroying. You're sitting there at your computer, sending out hundreds of emails and you're lucky if you get one response. But over time, with a bit of persistence and tenacity, I did get some responses and gradually started building the work. And I guess that's how it came to be. Now, I'm sort of on a similar kind of wage to what I was on when I was working for government in a management role, but I'm working a quarter of the time and I'm doing something that I love.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm even doing it in my pajamas. So you can't beat that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's the difference is that you're doing something that you love, which is really important. And I know quite a few public servants that work for government. It's just very much you're 7 hours a day, logging in, logging out. However, I like what you put in when we were corresponding, I felt like I had golden handcuffs on.
Absolutely, because the benefits are so great.
Yeah.
You get great pay for what you do. You get all the holiday pay, the sick pay. You can take as much time off as you want, just about. I used to joke many years ago that, in government, you could practically burn the building down and they wouldn't fire you. They'd just send you for counselling or something. It's not quite like that. But, it's a great position. And, towards the end, I started to envy the people that were happy to just show up to work and do their job, keep their head down and take the benefits, and I just couldn't do that in the end. It wasn't me. It wasn't satisfying.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned before you started pursuing your passion. So that's what was missing for you in government?
Very
Passion.
much so. Yeah. I said before how people would ask me what I do, and I'd say, I work for government, but I used to do this. Now I'm in a situation where I say, well, I used to work for government, but now I do this and it's great. And I'm really focused on what it is I do now because I'm proud of it.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Great.
You mentioned before that you had that safety net for yourself, which is not every story. A lot of people just go all out like on a limb, and you've had this wisdom to have that safety net behind you. But how hard was it for you to actually walk away from those benefits that you had?
I think because I really wanted out and I wanted this to work. And, I come from a family that's, very loving and very encouraging, but not huge risk takers. So I remember when I told my parents what I was doing, I could see the worry in their eyes and they were like, oh God, he had such a good job and now he's going to throw it all away. But I think having that upbringing taught me to be cautious and it taught me to plan ahead and be sensible about what I was doing. So I'm not the sort of person that would have just said, I can't handle this job anymore. That's it. I quit. I was careful about it and I was measured and I planned. And I was lucky to have the kind of job that I did that, I'd built up a number of years long service leave. And I thought, well, if I take it at half pay, that means I'm just getting a little bit of money coming in, but it's, it's there to be a safety net essentially. And like I said, if it all didn't work out and went pear-shaped, I could always go back to it. No matter how much I didn't want to, I wouldn't be cast adrift and left without anything.
Yeah.
So I think when you're making a big decision like that, look, some people can be really impulsive and say, no, I quit, and then figure out what they're going to do then. I couldn't do that. And, if I was ever going to give any advice, I would say, be careful about your decisions, trust your instincts, but make sure you're protected as well.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Absolutely.
Matt, what was one of the biggest obstacles you had to overcome in yourself in rewriting your story?
Probably my own self-doubt. I'm a confident person, but I have a lot of self-doubt, as we all probably do. Some of us don't necessarily own up to it, but I don't mind owning up to it. So I certainly had self-doubt. Could I make this work? There was a lot of people telling me that it wasn't possible. I felt I could do what I do well, but would other people think that? Or what happens if the work just didn't come in? Or what happens if it did come in for a while and then it just dried up and I'm left with nothing? So it was more about overcoming that sort of fear and inner self-doubt. But I think because I wanted it to work so much and because I believed in it, and I think after a short time of starting to get work coming in, and things were gradually building and building, that gave me more confidence in myself. That was when I was able to sort of overcome those self-doubts and fears. And look, I still to this day have some underlying fears, what if it all dries up tomorrow? But then I think, well, don't think like that, because what if it doesn't all dry up tomorrow?
What's the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah, well, yeah, you have to find something else to do.
Absolutely.
And you've done it before.
Done it before, and it gets easier. I think that the more you make those decisions, the easier it becomes.
Yeah. For someone who's listening and, not necessarily wants to do voiceover, because we're talking about transferable skills here. You happen to transfer those skills into something you're passionate about. The fear is actually real for a lot of people. The fear of recreating your story, the fear of recreating your life, the fear of stepping out of security. Now,
And
self-doubt is very real. And I realize, not everyone, I don't know any company in Australia that does long service for half pay. That must be an Australian government initiative. But definitely not most organisations have that opportunity. What would you say to that person that the fear is not allowing them to step out?
Look, I think, as you've alluded to, I was very fortunate in some of the things that I had around me, having those great conditions, and also having had developed a hobby that I then turned into a career. Some people want to rewrite their life story, but they don't know how. They don't know what they're going to do. So I think what you're talking about is such a common feeling. Lots of people feel trapped, feel like there's no other options available to them. They've got to keep going to that job that they hate. But look, I guess I would say, I always believe life's short, right? We get one shot at this, whatever your beliefs, at least on the surface, we get one shot at this. And I think it's really important not to have regrets and try and make the most of the time that you've got. So while you may really want to break out and rewrite your story, it's hard, right? And so rather than take a huge leap like I sort of did, break it down into small steps. You know, it's like the old adage, I think it's something like, how do you eat an elephant, or something like that? You break it into, you cut it into small pieces or whatever. You know, it's the same mentality. You need to break it down into small steps. So first of all, what is it that you want to do? If you don't know, well, then you've got to spend time thinking about that. Speak to friends and family and get ideas. What are you good at? What do you enjoy doing? What's your passion? And once you've sort of found that, okay, how do you get there? You've got to create a roadmap. So I didn't just say to my boss on the Friday, okay, that's it, I'm not coming in on Monday and I'm taking 9 months off. And then on Monday morning, suddenly I was getting all this voiceover work in. It didn't work like that at all. I was still employed while I was creating that roadmap. So, you know, first thing I had to do was figure out, okay, if I'm going to do this, what do I need to live? How much money do I need to earn to pay my mortgage, pay the bills, you know, put food on the table, all of those things. Now, another part of me that I guess you might say is lucky for making a decision like this, I'm not married and I don't have children. Now, I do have a long-term partner and we live together, but we don't have children. And so there was no responsibility there that I had to really provide for somebody else. So I look at that as a benefit because it was one less thing I had to be concerned about with making those choices. But, you know, so there was some budgeting involved. I had to sit down and work out what those figures looked like. Once I reached a figure, I thought, okay, so do I think I'm going to be able to earn that? What have I been earning on the side doing my 2 days a week of voiceover? And if I build it up, is it realistic that I could make, you know, this X figure that is going to support me? I felt it was. And so then I had to think, okay, well, what do I need to do this job? You know, I had to invest in some better equipment. I had to invest in myself by taking on some online training, because the other thing I should mention with voiceover, I know we're getting a little bit off your question here, but just to give a little bit more background, a lot of people that do voiceover work also have another job. They're generally actors or maybe musicians, or they have some other role in the arts, and voiceover is a little thing on the side. There's not a lot of people, although it is starting to change now, but there's not a lot of people that just do voiceover. So the issues you have to consider in that situation is, if somebody gives you a job, okay, how are you going to record it? Now, if I had to go into a studio in the city and record that job, well, that means I'm going to have to pay somebody for the studio time and for the engineer to record it and edit it. And then in that case, well, I'm not going to be earning any money because I'm going to be spending it all on that process. So I thought, okay, well, I've got to teach myself how to record. I've got to figure out how to set up a recording space in my home that's going to provide a professional result that people will be happy with. So they were all things that I had to, you know, build my knowledge and invest in myself. And there's no good doing that once I've left my job. I had to do all of that in advance. So, you know, there was a number of processes. And I guess my point, my long-winded way of getting to a point is, whatever it is that you decide you want to do and the changes you want to make, you got to put a lot of work into that before you make the leap, however big that leap is. And, you know, like I did, I get a lot of people ring me, say, I want to be a voiceover artist. And I can tell straight away, they think it's an easy option to make money. And I can tell you right now, it's not. It's not easy. But they think because they've been told they've got a nice voice, they don't think about all of the other elements that go into it. And there is so much that goes into it. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say here is that, first of all, you have to figure it out what it is you want to do. And then how are you going to get there? Create that map. And that map might take you months, years even to develop and work out. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting out of that is planning is so important. Planning and not rushing into it, but just really looking at it. And I guess where a lot of people that want to rewrite the story rush into it and actually go do it on adrenaline or do it on excitement. They don't have a measured approach. And what you took is a measured plan approach, knowing your numbers and knowing your gaps.
Yeah.
And then analyzing those gaps and seeing what is the bridge that I need to do to cross those gaps.
Absolutely. And it sounds to me from what you're telling us, you've had a way of thinking outside the box, as you mentioned. There's lateral thinking of what other sort of ways that you can achieve the success and what other areas that what are the certain steps that you can take in all these different processes. So you're not just putting yourself in one little box, you're thinking outside of that, which is really
Absolutely. And I think, and I certainly don't mean for this to sound conceited in any way, but I think that's been key to my success in doing this, having that approach, having that measured approach and well thought out and planned. Because like you say, if you are doing it impulsively or, on adrenaline, it may seem like a good idea at the time, but if you don't build the foundations, it's going to crumble underneath.
Yeah, good. Great point.
Great advice.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah. You mentioned before that someone gave you some advice, and that was know what you want to focus on or something about in those lines. How important have mentors been in your journey?
Very important. My biggest supporter is my partner, Naomi. So she showed me that it was possible, because she had done it herself, it was possible to leave a job and actually not have something else to go to. And I thought that was the most scary thing I'd ever heard, but she had done it a number of times. And that was a good example that she had set. But she also gave me some great advice, and I'll share it with you because it really changed my life. And it sounds so simple. But when I was going through this dilemma of should I do it, shouldn't I do it, I'm scared, she said, hey, don't forget, you get to make the choices in your life. And I know that sounds so simple and so obvious, but it just hit me. And I thought, oh yeah, I forgot. It sounds silly even saying it, but it's so true. We get to make any choice in our life. We're not controlled by other people. I know that people will listen to that and say, oh yeah, it's easy for you to say, I'm trapped in this job and I got bills to pay, and, it's not easy for me to just give that up and come up with something else. I recognize that. I'm not saying it is easy, but we all have a choice. Okay. I'm not saying that the result of that choice is going to be always easy, but you have the choice whether to go into that office every day and hate it. You could go into that office every day and try and make the best of it while you have to.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I really didn't want to be that person that had worked in that office for 30 years and hated every day of it, but I was just going in because I figured that's what I have to do. And that's how I was starting to become. And when Naomi said that to me, I thought, wow, that's so true. I can make any choice I want. And so, yeah, that was really important. So she was a huge inspiration to me, but I was also lucky to have, over the years from dipping my toe in the water of voiceover, had developed a few contacts in the industry, and they were really helpful as well, giving me advice on, how I could do things better. One of the people I mentioned earlier that said, don't try and be a jack of all trades. Stick to what you're good at and focus on that. And I think I have, in a way, and I think that's why I'm able to do it so well.
Tell us a bit about some of the work you've done, some of the more exciting or different work, or some work that, really stands out in your mind.
I guess, it sounds like a glamorous job being a voiceover artist. And whenever I meet somebody and they say, oh, what do you do? And I tell them, they say, oh, wow, I've never met anyone that does that. That's so cool. And it is cool, but you are doing a lot of mundane stuff as well. I do a lot of phone messaging. All right. That's probably my bread and butter. Okay. But I don't mind doing it. It's quick, relatively easy. I love speaking about all sorts of different things every day. And sometimes it's things I have no idea what I'm actually talking about. And that's the key. I've got to sound like I do know what I'm talking about. I know nothing about cars, for example, but I've read so many scripts about cars and the engines and what they do and this. I think I've got no idea what that thing is, what I've just spoken about, and and I guess that makes it amusing, but it makes every day interesting because you're talking about something different all the time. I do quite a few TV and radio commercials, and it's always a buzz when somebody rings you that you're talking to and they say, hey, did you do that commercial for such and such? And, yeah, that was me. And oh, I thought it was you. There's a few big brands that I've worked with, but there's lots of, the shop next door kind of businesses that I work for as well. Training videos, it's always interesting to be talking for hours at a time about, somebody's safety protocols and things like that. And I think, wow, I guess I probably shouldn't know all this stuff because they're a big company and they've got a lot of confidential information that they're trusting me with. I'm just trying to think if there's any unusual ones that I've done. I got a call from my friend a few weeks ago who was down at the pub, and he said, did you do a commercial for a worming product for sheep? And I said, yes, that was me. It's not glamorous. It's not a Hollywood style job, but it pays the bills, and I love it. I find it interesting. So yeah, nothing that really sticks out that I can say, well, I did this. I made out I was Brad Pitt once or something like that. But like I said, it's regular day-to-day sort of stuff, but it's interesting to me anyway.
Now, something you haven't mentioned, you're also in a band.
I am, yes.
And you're lead singer, I believe.
I am, yes. So all those years that I was telling you about that I lived overseas and worked with bands, I never played in a band the whole time. And when I came back to Australia, a friend said to me, you know what, you're always talking about singing. You really should give it a go. And I thought, you know what, he's right. Again, it was building the confidence to be able to do that. And so I played in a number of bands here in Adelaide in the pub scene for quite a few years. And one day I came across an ad for a band that was doing a Pink Floyd tribute, and they were looking for a new lead singer. And I'm a massive Pink Floyd fan. And I thought, I'd always played in bands with friends of mine. So it was a little bit stepping outside my comfort zone to go and audition for a band and, meet these guys that I didn't know. And, it was quite intimidating. But I love the music so much that I thought I would really regret it if I don't go for this. So I went for the job and I got it. And that was nearly 10 years ago. And I've been with them ever since. I'm pleased to say it has just gone from strength to strength. So we started out playing a couple of pubs in Adelaide. I think I did 2 pub gigs. After that, we decided, you know what, let's take things up a notch. And we started investing our money in booking small theatres in South Australia. That started going well. So we started looking further afield and we went into Victoria and did a few theatres there. And now I'm at a point where we're touring all of Australia, doing 25 to 30 shows a year in these massive theatres. And, I'm still pinching myself. I think, who am I? When people come up and they want their photo taken with you or your autograph, you think, man, I'm just somebody from Adelaide that, I'm nothing special, but you're bringing so much joy to these people who have grown up with this music. They've got a very personal connection with it. And it's all ages as well. It's from kids right through to people in their 80s. I had a guy tell me at a show somewhere in Victoria that him and his wife had escaped from behind the Iron Curtain and they had to hide their Pink Floyd records because it was illegal to have them. And he said that music is what kept us going, and you can see the emotion in these people's faces when they're telling you these stories and you think, oh my God, what a privilege for me to be able to perform this music that gives them so much joy and helps them relive great memories or difficult memories sometimes. I've had people coming up in absolute tears saying, thank you so much for tonight. It reminded me of my wife or my brother who passed away. We had a guy show up at a show who was literally on his deathbed. They wheeled him in on a gurney. Wow. And it was his dying wish to see a band playing Pink Floyd music. Wow. What a privilege, So I'm so fortunate to be doing this and to be doing it with guys that, I was intimidated at first, but they've become some of my closest friends and they're all wonderful people. I'm so lucky to do this.
Yeah. What a journey, eh?
Yeah, and it's another area you've rewritten your life story.
Again, I can tell you, like some of the other decisions in my life, I came from a point of not having a lot of confidence. When I first started out in bands, I was petrified to get up on a stage. Literally, I was so scared. My first ever gig was in a pub here in Adelaide, and I asked my best friend if he would join me by doing backing vocals just so I would feel comfortable standing on stage. And now that best friend is in the band, in the Pink Floyd band with me, which is wonderful. But, I don't feel anything like, sorry, I should rephrase that. I don't feel that fear anymore. I can happily walk out onto a stage like I did the other night in front of 1,200 people and be confident about what I'm doing and why I'm there. And that's a great feeling. It really is. And like anything, I think it's exposure. You have to just keep working at it and keep doing it until it's not fearful, until it's not something that you're afraid of.
Yeah, great point.
Absolutely.
Before we go to our final questions, what's next for you?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, at the moment, in the COVID lockdown, I decided I needed a new hobby. I've never really played an instrument. I've never I've tried a number of times to pick up a guitar and I just never had the staying power to stick with it. But I decided to buy a synthesizer and I've really taken to it and I love it. And I still don't know what I'm doing, but I know what I'm doing sounds right. And I've had a lot of great feedback. And so I'm starting to create sort of experimental electronic soundtrack style music. And I'm pleased to say I'm going to be releasing my first ever album this year, something I never thought I would ever do in a million years. But I had a lot of very encouraging and supportive friends around me that helped me with it. And so that's next immediately. Beyond that, I don't know. I really enjoy learning about audio production and things like that, which is something that I have to do for my day job. I only have to do it to a fairly minimal degree in my day job, but I love learning about it. And so I want to learn more. And, whether that means hopefully, moving more into a production sort of role, that would be great. I'm starting now to actually offer services to people that I can produce their voiceover demos and add music and do all that sort of stuff. And, I'm learning all the time. It's great fun.
And I love that you're learning all the time. And that's such a key to life, to rewriting our stories, to growth, is the learning factor. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you could go back and rewrite your life story, what would it look like now?
Well, I'm not sure I'd make too many different decisions. I think, as we get older, we all kind of fantasize about being younger and having the experience and knowledge that we have now that we're older. But obviously that's not possible. But, overall, I'm pretty happy with the choices I've made, good and bad. I mean, I think they all happen for a reason. And I'm not trying to be too airy-fairy about that answer, but I do. I feel certain decisions you make in life come from the gut. They're instinctual and they happen for a certain reason. And even my time, all those years that I worked at immigration, I wouldn't look back on that and say, oh, I wish I never did that, because I learned a lot of skills in that time. I never ever thought I would become a manager and learn to deal with difficult people and make difficult decisions and all of those sorts of things. So, I think it's all led me to this point and it's helped me become the person that I am. So, again, I wouldn't say this with any arrogance, but I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. And really, I couldn't be happier.
Matt, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and we're going to put your YouTube link in your profile so people can follow your music journey as well as your voiceover journey and hear you. I'm sure they'll hear you on the radio as well.
Listen out for that voice, huh?
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Now that we've interviewed our guest, join Charlene and I as we recap today's episode. What an interview.
Right.
I think Matt's really inspired me, and I'll tell you why it inspired me. I think I really liked his measured approach.
Yeah.
You know, he really took a sensible, measured approach and actually planned the change of his life so vulnerably, not vulnerably, but so measured and so approached. And it's almost as though he was fulfilling his own prophecy with the stages, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I can see how he's taken those passions that he's had and he's used that and not just gone straight in like and abandoned everything, but just taken, like you said, those measured approaches and really made sure that he was looked after during that time of transitioning. Yeah,
absolutely. He you know, he did it in a wise way that made sure he wasn't without for his partner, for himself, and really taking that approach where he planned it. And I think, you know, it goes back to that saying, prior preparation prevents peaceful performance. So he really did that, and I think that's a real inspiration as well. So, well done, Matt, for that.
Absolutely. Great job.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. We hope you found it informative and inspiring. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and share it with your friends and family. Also, make sure to visit our website at www.rewriteyourlifestory.com.au to learn more about our mission, products and services. And remember, you have the power to rewrite your own life story. So go out there, face your challenges head on and create the life you've always wanted. We'll see you in the next episode.